what you see is if there's a recurring problem in your relationship, even your relationship with yourself, is that there's something underneath that that's driving it. And unpacking that is a journey into hell. That's why people don't do it. If you have a problem in your marriage, that's a real problem, and you delve into it, it's like surgery for an infection. You'll get to the bottom of it. It will not be fun, and something seriously ugly is down there. And so that's down the rabbit hole in the Dante's Inferno. Now, Dante put betrayers at the lowest level of hell. And that's pretty damn accurate, because often what you'll find is if there's a recurring problem in a relationship, the reason that that problem is there is because, let's say, the person who's primarily responsible for that particular problem has been betrayed in some way that's either stopped their development at a certain age, so they're immature, or that's rendered them bitter and distrustful. You see a lot of problems between men and women in that manner because, like, there's an element of the female psyche that distrusts men as a category. And the same is true for men that distrust women as a category. And that's a real problem in a particularized relationship like a marriage. It's like, well, why don't you trust men? Well, maybe you're a woman who never had a positive experience with a man in your whole goddamn life. That's increasingly common. All the men you knew were absent. Sporadic relationships with your mother. Nothing dependable. So two things happen when you're aimless. Okay, so the first is you get anxious. And the reason you get anxious is because anxiety computes aimlessness. So if you drop someone in the middle of a desert, the reason they're anxious is because it's not because they don't know which way to go. It's because there are way too many places to go, right? Every direction. And that's aimlessness, is like every direction beckons. That's way too complicated. And your brain literally signals that with anxiety. Okay, so aimlessness and anxiety are the same thing, but it's worse. Your brain is set up to produce positive emotion. Literally, this is what the positive emotion system does. It computes decrease between you and a goal. So if you have a goal and you see that you've done something that moves you towards it, your brain produces a dopamine hit, and that makes you feel good, and it strengthens the neural circuits that moved you forward. It does both of those. That's reward and reinforcement. And what that means is, if you don't have a goal, you have no positive emotion. And when people say, they're aimless, they're partly telling you that they're anxious, but they're also telling you that they have no positive emotion. So then you say, well, what sort of goal should you have? Because that's the next question, right? And the answer to that is, well, ask yourself. And this future authoring program that I set up helps you do that. It's like, okay, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Maybe this isn't true, but maybe it is. You can have what you want in 5 years. But there's two conditions. You have to know what it is, and you have to aim at it. Okay, so let's say you're willing to play that game. Might be wrong, because who knows, you're going to get run over by a bus tomorrow, but you're going to play the game. Okay, now the next step is, all right, you probably want to have an intimate relationship. Now, maybe not, but probably, but assuming you do, imagine, pretend like you're a kid. You get to have an intimate relationship. What does it look like? What does it look like when your wife greets you when you come home from work? What does your sex life look like, right? What do you do for entertainment? How do you treat each other? You need a fantasy, just like a little kid playing house, right? Figure out what you want. Write it down. Figure out what you could do to start moving towards that, okay? Do that with your family relationships. Do that with your friendships. Do that with your career. Do that with your education. Think about your misuse of alcohol and drugs and other things that might drag you down. You want to drink? It's like, you want to be a bumbling Barney Gumble idiot? Like, you want to drink? Okay, what do you mean by that exactly? How often? How much is too much? How are you going to constrain that, and why? Develop a vision, and you have to do that in dialogue with yourself, right? It's like, if I could have what I wanted, what would satisfy me? And you might think, well, I could never get that. And I could say, well, maybe not, but I'll tell you one thing, man. You can move towards it. And I know that everyone who knows the underlying neuroscience knows this. Almost all the pleasure is in the moving toward. Yeah. So even, you don't want to set up a goal that's so high that there's just no possibility that a schlub like you could ever manage it. But God only knows what your upper limit is, But if you set up a goal that you think is, just on the edge of conceivability, then every time you move even a tiny bit towards that, you're going to think, good work, man, good work. You get a little kick from that. You get a little stronger from that. And that works like a charm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. An end of aimlessness.
The end of aimlessness.
That's the desert in Exodus, eh? When the Egyptians leave the Pharaoh, they leave tyranny, right? And everybody thinks, oh my God, we're out of tyranny. Now it's freedom. Everything's great. That isn't what happens. They go into the desert. They're aimless. They're slaves. They have no capacity for self-governance. They have no vision of their own. They leave the tyranny, and now they're somewhere worse. They're out in the aimless desert. And part of the reason people like tyranny, even their own, is because they don't want to be aimless in the desert.
It's why some people go back to prison.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's why after the Soviet Union collapsed, it's why so much of the population was nostalgic for Stalin. You bet. It's also why Lot's right. There's a story of Lot's wife when Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. She looks back. God turns her into a pillar of salt, right? You don't look back. When you escape somewhere terrible, you don't look back and long to be there. But it means you have to develop a new vision.
Right. If you don't develop a new vision, then part of you will look back just because you want to have some organization. Your brain wants to have organization. Some
direction.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Here's another rule. This is a terrifying rule. If you don't provide yourself with direction, you will take direction from a tyrant. Right. Right. So, and you might say, well, why should I take responsibility? You asked that, it's like, I'm afraid of my own goals because of the responsibility. It's like, well, you're either going to be responsible to yourself, or you're going to be responsible to a tyrant, or you're going to be absolutely lost. That's your option set.
Yeah,
right.
That's it.
Yeah, pick one. Tyranny, slavery, or something approximating visionary self-determination. One of the things you have to understand about women is you have to listen to them. Women are more sensitive to negative emotion than men, on average. Women are more agreeable. That would be part of the maternal dimension of their personality. And they're more sensitive to negative emotion. So their threat detection systems. And so a woman will bring you her concerns. Now, because she's sensitive to threat, she produces a fair number of false positives, right? So she's concerned about things that maybe it's not necessary to be concerned about, but she'll be concerned about them before you are. So women initiate about 75% of divorces, for example. And you might say, well, that means women are primarily troublesome within a relationship. It's like, well, possibly. It's also possible that they pick up what's wrong in a relationship before men do on average. So a woman will be concerned about something. She'll bring her concerns to her husband, and he'll try to solve the problem right away. But that's not helpful because she doesn't know what the problem is necessarily. So she has to wander around and talk about all the things that might be a problem. And if you let her do that, she'll dispense with most of that. And then you can kind of zero in on what the problem might be. And then if you let the discussion unfold to that degree, then you can potentially offer a solution. But you can't do that too early.